Okay. You are live with Dave Jose. I want to say hello to everyone. Uh, I'm sitting in the place where I get therapy. I work on hot rods and uh, build the cars of my dreams. But I had to slow down and talk to you guys. I wanted to come live and do this video. Not a lot of people are used to me going live, so I don't expect to see tons of people like I see on Facebook. But this will allow for me to be able to share this video later on with tons of people. Now, the problem we've been having with Facebook is that Facebook has been destroying a lot of the videos, messing up the audio, allowing it to be shaky when I say certain words, chopping up the audio when I say certain words. So it is what it is. But what we're going to talk about today is this idea that's being put out there where people want us to believe that the only way that we can deal with our issues with government is for the legislature or the representatives to be able to do it for us. There is a gentleman in a group who we had a situation where a governor was going above and beyond his power that he was authorized to use in the Constitution, which the Constitution is what's called a trust indenture. It explains the powers granted from people to officials or officers who will work in certain positions. Now, the thing about the Constitution and the trust indenture is it deals with grants of authority, and it doesn't deal with anything else. What happens is that you can grant authority to someone who's going to take up a position of trust. When you grant that authority, that's what their power is. It's not about what did you say they couldn't do. It's about what did you grant them authority to do, right? So what's happened today is a lot of people who want more government intrusion and they want to hide what your true powers are and rights are, they will tell you that you can't do certain things if the government doesn't tell you you could do it. Let me see if I could look up what people are saying. Okay, so somebody, if you can, please type in test just so I could see. So I could see if this is correct. And I'm going to share this live on Facebook real quick. Okay, so let me pray real quick and we could get going. Dear Heavenly Father, let me see. Okay, good. Good job. Thank you so much for hitting test. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for this day. I want to thank you for this opportunity to be able to speak. I want to thank you for the people who will watch this video. I ask that you help me to say things simply and plainly that those who want to live faithfully and do the right things can see it and run with it. Please bless all the work that we're doing. Please continue to lift us up, bless this nation, bless the other nations, and help people to be able to stand on the true law. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay. So it's funny, I just saw where it said test and then it bounced off the screen. But okay, so there are people who want us to believe that we don't have any power to discipline the government, reform the government, change the government unless it's through our legislature. And that doesn't really make sense because in the Constitution of the United States, it lets us know that anytime that the government becomes oppressive, it goes against our pursuit of happiness or life and liberty, that we can reform it or abolish it. Now, if we always have the power to abolish something, that means it is at all times amendable to us. We can change it at all times. If we, by right and by declaration, when we created it or our forefathers created it, we put in there that we have the power to always amend it, then that means that you don't have the power as a government official to just leave and stop going to work and say, well, I'm not at work today, so you can't really come to me about changing this. Or, hey, the bar members who the legislature hired told us that they don't have to pay attention to the people, so we're not going to actually let that law come onto the books, or we're not going to respect that change, or we're not going to give them due process. You can't do it. So what happens is that the legislature, by the attorneys who are teaching them so-called law, have gotten this idea that they don't have to listen to the people, and that like the people are their slaves. The problem is that they signed up under the conditions to be servants. When they signed up under the condition to be servants, they also consented to being servants. So when you consent to be a public servant, and you sign up to be a public servant, you are bound by the oaths you make, and you are bound by the statutes that limit or restrict your right to do other things that you might want to do. So when you're on the clock at work, this is why they can restrict your speech. If you notice, police officers who swear an oath to the Constitution and sign up to follow the statutes and the ordinances and the rules for government, a lot of times they're not allowed to have political opinion, meaning they can't be on the left or the right. They just have to be neutral. Now, why is it that there is freedom of speech, but government workers are not allowed to, at times, to express their beliefs? Why can we see a police officer get fired on TV? On YouTube, we can see a police officer get fired for expressing his opinion. We can see other political officials say that they don't like Donald Trump, or they don't like this president or that person, and show political bias, and they get fired. The reason is because you consent to the rules that are put there. Now, the people, do they get punished by the government for having a opinion, right? So it is in our rights. It is in our rights to be able to have a political opinion at all times, right? So we have freedom of speech. Now, when you look at our duties, so let's take Arizona Constitution, Declaration of Rights, which is going to be number 2, and then you're going to have section 2 of that, and it's going to tell you that all political power is inherent in the people. The power to deal with all things that are government is inherent in the people. Because it's inherent in the people, they can give some of that power or grant some of that power to a seat, right? To a seat of government. They can allow for someone to be a judge. They can allow for someone to be one of the members of the legislature or a member of the executive branch. They make that office. And then people are elected or appointed to fill the seats. Now, watch this. Because people are elected to fill the seats, they are elected to fill the seats when they are in good behavior. You'll see a lot of this when you look at the judiciary. It'll talk about how judges sit in their seats or hold their offices in the inferior courts and the Supreme Court when they are in good behavior. Now, it is ultimately the people's duty to deal with any judge that is not in good behavior. So let's say if a judge is raping women and the legislature doesn't want to do anything about it because the legislature is part of some program where they're allowing judges to take women in for some federal funds. And the legislature's like, no, we're not going to do anything. You'll see that the government officials are at all times amendable to the people, meaning we can change them and scratch them at any time by right. Now, there are certain people in the movement who want to tell you that, oh, well, no, you don't have a right to remove a judicial official. Now, think about this. So, if we have judicial officials in the state, and what happens is people will try to deceive you. They'll say, "Oh, well, by the 14th Amendment, we have the power to tell the state this, that, and the other." Well, the 14th Amendment really ain't got nothing to do with what a judge is doing in a state. Your state constitution is where the judge is making oath. Of course, he's swearing to uphold the United States Constitution. But when you are a 14th Amendment citizen, you are a citizen of the District of Columbia, is what you really are. And the so called protections under the District of Columbia aren't applying to you because you're not in the District of Columbia. You're in one of the states. So if you are a man or woman who is an inhabitant of one of the states and you are one of the people, you have protections in that state where they can't go against your rights. So if you try to use the 14th Amendment for a District of Columbia citizen inside of Arizona, they have the right, they have the duty to make a decision with discretion if you are applied those rights when you are in Arizona, where you have natural rights, rather than the United States corporate rights or privileges that they give you under the United States. That is not just the states put together, but it is actually the District of Columbia, United States, a corporation. Now, people will tell you, no, that's not true, but all you have to do is look at I think it's called the Northern Mariana Islands, and you look at how they were accepted into the United States, and it was done by a trust. So they were naturalized through a trust. If you look at how they trap people who are Americans inside of a jurisdiction where they say, if you are bound by the laws of the United States and under the jurisdiction of the United States, then you are a citizen of the United States, right? So what happens is that they are creating a trust that allows you to be naturalized under the 14th Amendment under the guise of offering you rights. You don't have to have the United States, the 14th Amendment offer you in 1868 rights. You even had a public law in 1866 called the Civil Rights Act that said that every man or woman of every color and every race had rights to bring suit and do all this stuff. So you can't say that, and this was before the 14th Amendment, that you had to give people some civil rights based on the 14th Amendment. Then you go before that, and you find that being one of the people in the Constitution allowed for you to have rights outside of the Constitution. Being one of the people in the states allows for you to have rights outside of the Constitution. It's just that some are bills of rights or declared rights. So in order to keep you from standing on your rights, what's happening is that, and somebody, can you give me some feedback and let me know if the video is clear? Can you let me know if the video is choppy or if they're messing with my audio or video or anything? Because that'll help me to make sure if I want to continue to use this. So if you can, please put good audio if the audio is good in video, or can you put no, the audio is choppy, bad, video, choppy, bad, whatever. Just some good feedback so I can understand how we're looking, right? So anyway, what we must understand, guys, is that people will try to prevent us from exercising the power and authority we have. So we have to make sure that we realize that the Constitution says that they are always amendable to us. I'll do a video with the Constitution later, if it is your will to see it, where the Constitution says, perfect, thank you, Rita. I can show you where the Constitution says that the governments are created for our benefit and our happiness, and pretty much says it was created, or it is created by our will only, not government officials. They are our servants. Is created by our will only. Is created for the goodness and the safety of us. the benefit of us, and they are at all times amendable to us. We can change them at any time if we're not happy, if they're harming us, whatever. So understanding that, just know that there's certain people who are going to teach the Constitution backwards. Not only are they going to teach the Constitution backwards, but what they're going to do is they're going to play a game to limit your ability to have access to your remedy. Your remedy, everybody always talk about some, well, how do we get remedy? How do we get remedy? How do we get remedy? The way you get remedy is by doing the opposite of what the public officers and the bar attorneys have done to hide the law. If you look in the book of Luke, in the KJV Bible 11:52, it explains how Jesus tells us that lawyers hide the key to knowledge, right? And then they hinder those who enter in to try to get the knowledge, and they're not going in themselves. So what's happening is they're not using law against you. They're using doctrines and other ideas and so-called legal theories and all this crap against you that's not written in the law, not written in the Constitution. So because they do that, we have to become wise. We have to look and say, look, when we ask questions about what's lawful, attorneys will not openly just give us all the answers. So that shows us who their allegiance is to. If they can't come out and just speak freely and tell us everything that's wrong in CPS law, everything that's wrong in law when it comes to driving or traveling, they can't tell us what's right and wrong when it comes to houses and mortgages and all this stuff. They never want to just come out, not never, some people do. Usually they don't want to come out openly and just speak about what the Constitution says, the truth, and all the flaws in the laws that, or the statutes and codes that are being put out, and the error in the theory of the people who are teaching legal things. And so that's what's happening. So we also have moles. We also have people who their job is to keep us from knowing the truth. Their job is to keep us from understanding the Constitution. Because if we understand the Constitution and understand that it's a trust indenture and that authority is granted, and that anything that is not granted is not part of the issue. So if a governor says, I want to shut you down based on an emergency, you have to have in the Constitution where it says there's an emergency clause, that anytime there's an emergency, the Constitution is suspended, and it had to be granted by the people. That don't exist anywhere. It doesn't exist. So when they try to tell you these things and they try to show you that you don't have any power, you don't have any authority, this is a last-ditch effort to retain control because they know that they're losing it. They know that people are not hearing it. They know that they don't have any grant of authority in the Constitution that says they can do something. This is another reason you hear this argument where they say, well, the Constitution is just a piece of paper. It don't apply here. This, that, and the other. Some clever attorney has tricked them into believing that, hey, we got a new way of doing things, that the people's ideas in the Constitution don't count, even though it's the same place where we got the authority to have the seat we're sitting in. So how do you sit in a seat? Is my video chopping up? Please let me know if the video is starting to act up now. How do you sit in a seat called in the judiciary to allow you to be a judge, and then that same power from the people that allowed you to be a judge, you say the document that allowed you to be a judge doesn't count, but you still gonna act as a judge? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. And so there is an attack on the people realizing and understanding that they have the power to change the government at all times. I will show you guys later, if the Lord wills, in the 1877 Georgia Constitution, which my buddy Jonah teaches so well. And in the 1877 Georgia Constitution, you'll find where it says that anytime there's a public law, a general law, not a public law, a general law that gives an idea of how things are going to be done, there should be no special law created that will allow for government officials to be able to change the way that those laws will be dealt with, except for by the written consent of those who it will affect. So if you're one of the people and they make a statute, if they don't have your written consent to be part of the system and the statute, then they can't apply it to you. Now, why is this important? The reason this is important is because people think that the consent of the governed means that once the legislature writes something, that it applies to every man and woman. That's not true. Once the legislature writes something, it applies to all those who consent to work inside of the government. Those who work inside of the government decide to be governed by the statutes that control how the government regulates itself. I showed you guys in section 1, Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, how the legislature has the power to write the rules and regulations for the government, right? So the legislature is going to write the rules and regulations for the government. So when the legislature writes out the rules and regulations for the government, anybody after that time who decides to sign up to be a worker for the government has to take an oath. An oath to do what? An oath to follow the Constitution and the laws of the state. Okay? So they consent to it by taking an oath. They are offered a position. They accept that position. They sign an oath saying that they're going to follow the laws of the state and the Constitution. Now, if everybody already has to follow the Constitution and follow the laws of the state, then why do they have to sign an oath? Why do they have to sign an oath? See how stupid that is? Why would you ever have to look? When you're single, right? You don't have to sign an oath to say that you're going to be married to your spouse and not cheat. Okay? But when you get married, you make an oath, a vow to one another, right? So you're not bound by the oath until you make the oath. You're not bound by the covenant or the law of the marriage until you make the oath. Okay? So when people try to tell you that you are bound to every law and statute and every code, how are you bound to every law and statute and code unless you decide to consent and sign up for it? I'll give you an example. In Arizona, I think it's 26 ARS 26-317, I believe, where it says that anybody who doesn't take part in, or any person, right, which deals with personnel and people who work for the government, any person who does not participate with a emergency like an emergency program or emergency situation can be fined or imprisoned or something of that nature. But this does not apply to anyone who is part of a private organization who does not want to participate in it. If the law is for everybody, how does it say that somebody who's in a private membership or association or a private organization is not bound if they don't want to participate in an emergency program or an emergency lockdown or shutdown or something? You are not bound by an emergency lockdown or shutdown if you are in the private. People are in the private. What that means is if you didn't sign up for it and you're in the private and you have a contract to go to say that you don't have to follow these types of things, you don't have to follow it. That's really deep. See, we have been taught the Constitution, our supreme law, backwards. And people don't understand the difference between being in the public and the private. So people try to make fun of you for saying that you're not bound by certain laws when the statutes even tell you that you're not bound by certain laws. So we have to wake up and realize that some people are working inside the system to try to retain control of everybody, and they don't want you to know what you have the power to do. They don't want you to know what the Constitution says you could do, because the Constitution says that you can replace the government at any time. And if somebody in the government is deciding to go against the Constitution and fight the people, that's what's called an insurrection. they're going against the people, which is treason. You cannot war against the people who created your seats. That is nuts, okay? So anyway, I just wanted to get this video to you guys. I don't know how to stop recording though. I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for giving me a chance to be able to speak to you. Let me see, how do you shut this thing down? Anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming on. If you like the video, please let me know. Please share it on Facebook, share it on any other platforms that you can, just so people can start getting an understanding of what the truth is. And I just want to thank you for coming on. I think if I hit the X, it'll let me go. I love you guys. Y'all stay out of trouble. Y'all be cool. Peace. We can delegate. I see where somebody said, who can we delegate to? We delegated authority already through our forefathers to government offices and seats, who people are able to sit in, but we decide and make the law. So if the people are saying that these people are doing wrong, then we can give notice to the legislature, give notice to anybody else, give notice to the Secretary of State, give notice to the governor, and we can change the form of government. We can remove it, and we can rewrite anything we need to, or we can make changes to make sure that they can't do what they need to do. For more information on that, you can simply go to the Missouri Constitution. The Missouri Constitution tells you that we have the power in the Bill of Rights to regulate the government and their police. And if they're doing wrong, we can remove them. So that's what we have the power to do. And if you say, well, how can we do that? If you look at how we created the Constitution, the people came together and decided, look, we're sick of this. We want to have our protections delegated to other people so we can focus on our farming, focus on being a blacksmith, focusing on doing whatever I got to do. So what happens is that they came together and they wrote from scratch the Constitution, and the people agreed to it. That made us a people who could have certain protections. Same thing can be done now. If you don't like something, we can come together, discuss it, and we can rewrite. And we can remove anybody who's harming us or causing an issue to us. So it's not that we have to do it through them. We don't have to ask their permission. The people come together and make a decision when they realize they're being harmed. All right. So I'm going to catch you guys later. Y'all be cool. Y'all stay out of trouble.